Saying no can be the key that separates those who win from those who only dream of winning. How many times have you wondered why it feels like you're always giving your all, but the results just don't show? Maybe the problem isn't what you're doing, but what you're still accepting. Have you ever stopped to think that often the yes you give to others is the same no you give to yourself? The truth is, we live in a world that idolizes yes. They say that those who say no are cold, selfish, even ungrateful. But what if the real power lies in learning to refuse what steals your peace, your focus, and your faith? What if the secret to getting closer to your purpose, to the plan God has reserved for you, lies in closing certain doors? A no isn't rejection, it's direction. It's the way the chosen one finds to avoid getting lost in the noise. Throughout this video, you'll discover that no is one of the deepest forms of self-love and spiritual obedience. You'll understand how it protects your energy, strengthens your faith, and places you at the center of God's will. By the end, you won't just see no with new eyes, you'll feel the weight of the freedom that comes with choosing wisely. And then, no will stop being a wall and become the path that leads to your true yes. Sometimes the hardest person to say no to is yourself. It's easy to accept invitations, please everyone, or try to prove your worth. But those who learn to set boundaries aren't pulling away, they're protecting themselves. Saying no is like building spiritual walls that keep the enemy from sneaking in with distractions disguised as opportunities. It's the strength that separates the impulsive from the wise, the distracted from the chosen. And there's no progress without this kind of protection. Self-discipline isn't punishment, it's freedom. It's the act of looking at something that shines now and saying, I could, but I choose to wait. It's the control that keeps fleeting pleasure from destroying eternal purpose. God doesn't call the strongest, He strengthens those who obey. And sometimes that obedience starts with a simple no. Saying no to laziness, fear, or comparisons creates space for the yes that comes from above. Those who don't master their own yes end up being mastered by the desires of the moment. But those who learn to refuse what pulls them away from their essence get closer to their destiny. Self-discipline is the invisible foundation of every great achievement. It's the quiet secret of those who win in public because they first conquered themselves in private. And it's in that inner battlefield that the next fight begins, the one between the flesh and the spirit. This is a war no one escapes. Every day a voice inside calls for comfort, while another whispers, stay strong, it's not over yet. The flesh wants instant pleasure, the shortcut. The spirit wants purpose, the right path, even if it's longer. And this is where discernment comes in, knowing when it's God speaking and when it's just emotions trying to take the wheel. Faith isn't feeling, it's choosing what's right, even when everything inside you screams otherwise. The power doesn't lie in never feeling the urge to err, but in having the strength not to give in. When anger comes, the impulse to retaliate in kind feels irresistible. But the true chosen one understands that sometimes silence is the greatest response. Saying no to revenge is trusting that God is just and that His timing never fails. That choice isn't weakness, it's wisdom, it's faith put into practice. Each time the spirit triumphs over the flesh, something within us matures. A person stops being a prisoner of their feelings and starts being guided by what they believe. And when that happens, life changes direction, because those who learn to say no to fleeting pleasure become worthy of receiving lasting promises. And no one understood this better than a man who gave up the comfort of a palace to obey his calling, Moses. Not every no is a loss, sometimes it's the start of a calling. Moses could have lived surrounded by luxury, power, and influence. He had everything the world values, but something inside him said, this isn't enough. When he chose to leave the palace, it wasn't an act of madness, it was an act of faith. He understood that following God's voice requires letting go of what feels secure. Saying no to comfort was saying yes to purpose. That choice is never easy. Moses' no echoes in the lives of those who feel they were born for something greater, but fear the cost. Sometimes it's refusing a job that steals your peace, or a relationship that drains your energy. It's choosing the invisible over the immediate. Those who trust know that what comes from God is never lost. It only matures in His perfect timing. Comfort is tempting, but a calling is irresistible. The good is the enemy of the best. Moses understood this when he traded fleeting glory for an eternal mission. Every person at some point faces the same dilemma. Follow what feels good or what transforms. When you say no to ease, you pave the way for victories that time cannot erase. But to do that, you must endure the pain of discipline, the kind that shapes character before achievement. There are pains that strengthen and pains that destroy. The pain of discipline weighs heavy for a time, but the pain of regret lasts a lifetime. It's that bitter feeling of knowing you could have done things differently, but chose the shortcut. God doesn't want perfection. He wants consistency. He wants people willing to choose what's right, even when it hurts. Because every harvest depends on the no you plant at the right time. The problem is that many confuse discomfort with failure. When discipline feels heavy, they think God has gone silent. But in truth, He's teaching. It's in the silence that the chosen one grows. The no that feels like a burden today is the same one that will open doors tomorrow. Saying no is delaying pleasure to live out purpose. It's trusting that God's timing is worth more than any impulse. Those who endure the weight of discipline discover a power few know, mastery over themselves. And those who master themselves master their destiny. True faith doesn't flourish in comfort, but in resistance. Every no said with wisdom is a seed of victory planted in the soil of patience. That's how spiritual growth is born, the kind that transforms the heart and frees the mind. The enemy doesn't always come disguised as evil. Sometimes he appears as a distraction, a notification, a comparison, a subtle doubt. All of these steal time and energy, and that's where no needs to step in. Saying no to distractions is saying yes to purpose. It's reserving space for what truly matters, hearing God's voice, strengthening faith, and reconnecting with what gives life meaning. Spiritual growth begins when you learn to close the doors that lead nowhere. Emotional maturity doesn't come from having everything under control, but from knowing what deserves your attention. Rejecting self-deprecating thoughts is an act of courage. When your mind says you're not enough, it's time to respond, God chose me and that's enough. Instead of comparing, give thanks. Instead of complaining, pray. That's the practice that turns insecurity into confidence. The no is the filter that separates what builds from what destroys. And the curious thing is, the more someone learns to say no, the freer they become. Free from others' opinions, from external pressures, from inner voices that say it won't work out. Saying no is tending to your own garden, watering the seeds of faith and letting time do the rest. Growth doesn't happen in the noise, but in the silence of those who choose to wait on God. And it's in that silence that character is forged, just as it was with Joseph. Joseph didn't win by chance. He won because he knew how to say no when everything pushed him to say yes. He was young, handsome, and alone in a foreign land. He could have given in to the temptation of Potiphar's wife and no one would have known. But Joseph understood something few do. God sees what human eyes don't, and those who are faithful in secret are exalted in due time. Resisting what seems irresistible is the purest proof of integrity. Joseph didn't just resist temptation, he fled from it. Sometimes the secret isn't in facing evil head-on, but in escaping it with wisdom. Integrity isn't negotiable, and every no, Joseph said, brought him closer to his destiny. God doesn't forget those who honor him when no one's watching, and it's in that silent obedience that the true chosen one is revealed. Joseph's no changed the course of his story. That no took him from prison to the palace. What seemed like a loss was, in truth, a step upward. Those who say no to temptation pave the way for the promotion that comes from heaven. And that same inner strength, that ability to master emotions, is what sets the wise apart from the impulsive. Something Esau, unfortunately, didn't grasp. Some trade their greatest treasures for crumbs of momentary relief. That's what Esau did when he swapped his spiritual birthright for a bowl of stew. He chose the pleasure of the moment and lost the purpose of the future. It's a vivid picture of what happens when emotions take control. Those who live driven by haste and desire end up saying yes to what destroys and no to what saves. And that's where self-control becomes a divine gift, not an obligation. Mastering emotions is harder than conquering an army. It's looking at anger, fear, or lack, and still holding your balance. It's not about suppressing, but redirecting. When the heart submits to faith, even chaos finds peace. True power lies in the one who breathes deeply before reacting, prays before acting, and listens before speaking. Self-control is the invisible fortress of those who walk with God. Esau shows what happens when the now matters more than the eternal, but Joseph, on the other hand, shows the power of resisting and waiting. Two paths, two outcomes. Emotions are great servants, but terrible masters. Those who learn to say no to impulses become free. And that freedom isn't just emotional, it's spiritual, because the same no that saves a soul today prepares a destiny for tomorrow. Joseph discovered this even when everything seemed unjust. Few could endure what Joseph endured. Betrayed by his brothers, falsely accused, forgotten in prison, yet he didn't let bitterness take over. He could have rebelled, but he chose to serve. He could have given up, but he chose to trust. His no to self-pity kept his hope alive. And that kind of silent resilience reveals the depth of a man's faith. Saying no to victimhood challenges pride. It's understanding that not every pain is punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. Joseph didn't wait to be exalted to act with excellence. He was excellent even at rock bottom. When everything seemed lost, God was watching in silence, testing his heart. Joseph's faithfulness was the ticket that took him from obscurity to honor. His no to rebellion became the yes of a miracle. Injustice is the most revealing test of character. When everything feels wrong and the soul cries for revenge, that's when the true chosen one shines. Joseph didn't let pain define him, he let purpose guide him. Every tear he shed watered the ground of his promotion. And this principle is eternal. Saying no to bitterness prepares the heart for God's favor. But not everyone learns this lesson, as Gehazi's story shows. Not every fall comes from big mistakes. Sometimes it's born of small concessions. Gehazi had the privilege of walking beside a prophet, seeing God's power up close, but he stumbled over greed. He saw a chance for quick gain and forgot the value of faithfulness. The same heart that once served in purity was overcome by covetousness. And when no stops being said, destiny slips away silently. Gehazi's story is a warning for those who think no one is watching. What we do in secret determines whether we're promoted or removed. He chose to hide, lie, and take what wasn't his, and he paid dearly for it. The cost of disobedience was his health and future. God doesn't punish out of anger, but teaches out of love. What Gehazi lost wasn't just a blessing, it was the trust of being chosen. Integrity is what we do when no one applauds. It's saying no to easy gain, false praise, or the temptation to seem more than you are. The no Gehazi didn't say distanced him from what could have been. This shows that serving isn't enough. You must serve with a clean heart. Integrity is the soil where faith flourishes, and when it's lost, purpose withers. There comes a moment when you can't ignore what your heart is shouting. It's time to look within and ask, what am I still allowing to pull me away from God? The no you're afraid to say is often the one that sets you free. It's the boundary that saves, the cut that heals, the choice that realigns your path. The calling isn't to perfection, but to awareness, to live with purpose and faith, not by impulse. God doesn't want anyone trapped in the past, but he also doesn't bless those who persist in the same mistakes. Some doors only open when you have the courage to close others. You must refuse friendships that lead astray, habits that weaken, thoughts that limit. A no isn't punishment. It's an invitation to freedom. And that freedom carries the sound of peace for those who've learned to trust in God's perfect timing. Those who learn to say no with wisdom become unstoppable, because the right no at the right time is what transforms destiny. It prepares the heart for favor, the mind for promotion, and the soul for healing. A no makes room for God's yes, the one that changes everything. And when that understanding blooms, a person stops merely surviving and finally starts living.